Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I want to discuss the build I'm intending to league start in 3.17. This is a Lightning Trap Saboteur. This is something that I did a playtest of towards the end of 3.16, and it was fine. It's also a build that's been slightly buffed in the patch notes, not all that much, but it is slightly stronger than it was in 3.16. This is a bosser and mapping hybrid build. That means that it's not going to be the best at map clear in the world, it's not going to be the best bosser in the world, but it will be capable of doing both. And I'm expecting to take down most of endgame with this in a reasonable time frame on reasonably bad gear. I'm not expecting this to be something that you need to invest 100 exalts in order to take down fights like Uber Elder, though you will need to know the fights. You're not going to be in a position that you're so powerful that you can just stomp all over them. We're going to be using Lightning Spire Trap as well. Lightning Trap is a trap skill that has a lot of damage projection and mediocre damage. Lightning Spire Trap hits a very concentrated small area and hits it hard. So these two skills work well together. They scale off pretty much all the same stats, and that means that they work really well as a pair. Defensively, we're going to be using Grace, Determination, Defiance Banner, Aura Scaling, Ghost Shroud, and once you've got a really quite good gear set together, you'll probably also be able to get 100% spell suppression on this build. That said, I'm not going for spell suppression early. If you want to, you'll be able to adapt the build slightly in order to fit that in. I'm expecting to probably get it about the time I start running tier 14, 15, 16 maps. That's about when I'm going to look to get 100% spell suppression. So the patch notes were kind to this build. I was already good enough in 3.16, then they went and buffed Lightning Trap by 41.4% at gem level 20, and potentially by more at higher gem levels, although that's not yet completely confirmed. Now this balances out the nerf that took place to multiple traps, which this build would have used in 3.16. And in fact, I used multiple traps when I was playing this build, then realized that actually Swift Assembly is fine. Swift Assembly is worse than 3.16 multiple traps was, but it's still pretty good. And I think that it is the right gem to use going forward, and that's why I'm going to use it. We're only using that on our Lightning Trap, not on our Lightning Spire Trap. Lightning Spire Trap doesn't work well with gems like Swift Assembly. So the key mechanics, I want to show a little bit of gameplay footage here. This is how the build plays against Eternal Labyrinth Azaro. You throw a trap on the ground, the enemy walks on it or it expires. This causes 8 projectiles to fire in a Nova. By default, these projectiles don't pierce or chain or fork. We're going to fix that. We're going to give them the ability to pierce through the passive tree. Later on, at a higher gear level, there are going to be options that will allow you to respec out of the 3 passive points that we invest in piercing in order to take other things, and they'll be found in gear. There's a number of items that we'll be considering when we're talking there, and they're pretty much all boots. We're also going to scale damage through critical strikes, and also some incidental shocks. We're not going to be inflicting 50% shocks on enemies, but we will be inflicting 12 to 25% shocks on a lot of things. We're going to augment the serviceable but unspectacular boss damage that you get from Lightning Trap with Lightning Spire Trap. Lightning Trap will provide the shocks, and that means that we can even use Elemental Focus to further augment the damage of Lightning Spire Trap if we wish. Damage scaling. We have a number of ways that we can scale damage on this build. Some examples of this are through the weapon prefixes increased spell or lightning damage as a percentage, flat added lightning damage to spells, which has been buffed in 3.17, +1 to the level of lightning spell skill gems, which can go up to +3 on two-handers, although I don't think I want to go with two-handers on this one, and +1 to the level of all spell skill gems, which goes up to +2 on two-handers. A suffix with crit chance is great too, as is crafted trap throw speed. So there's a lot of different mods that we can use, and we'll come back to this further when we're talking about endgame gearing options. Our Ascendancy is going to be the Saboteur. Take Pyromaniac first. Don't make the mistake I did. I took it last, thinking, oh yeah, this is just pure defense. I want more damage to get through the axe quicker. That was a mistake. Pyromaniac will cover all of your non-emergency life recovery, and also by making you immune to shock and ignite, will solve a lot of problems for you. Pyromaniac is really good. Born in the Shadows and Perfect Crime should be your second and third Labyrinth in whichever order you choose. Perfect Crime if you want more damage, Born in the Shadows if you want safety earlier on. Then one of Chain Reaction and Explosives Expert last. Both of these are valid choices. I'm not going to say that one of them is better than the other. I will, however, personally take Chain Reaction at this point and miss out on Explosives Expert. I certainly would not fault anyone that chooses to go the other way around, because Explosives Expert offers a lot of power too. You'd also make a good variant of this build in a different Ascendancy, and I think there's a good Inquisitor build around this key concept of a Lightning Trapper, but that's going to be beyond the scope of this video. Later on in the video, we're going to discuss the option of using an alternating scepter. Alternating scepters are very much endgame gear. They're something that only comes from Heist and that is fairly rare, especially early on in the league. But if you do decide to go with an alternating scepter, it's a really good option for the build. And if you do that, Explosives Expert is basically rubbish for you. You're going to want to get rid of that because the scepter makes it so much worse. At that point, just makes the choice easy. You go in Chain Reaction instead. So leveling tips. 1 to 11, use anything. I used Stormblast Mine and I hated it. But I'm probably going to do the same thing again in 3.17. Level 12, Lightning Trap comes online. It's good immediately. Use it in conjunction with either added Lightning support or added Cold support. Only one of those two gems, and in conjunction with Swift Assembly support. At level 20, you're going to want to pick up a good caster wand. There is a vendor recipe that will allow you to do this. You need a rare topaz ring, a well-linked wand that is currently magic, and an orb of alteration. What this will do, it's sort of like using that alteration orb on the wand, except it forces, the addition of the rare topaz ring forces a specific roll. That will be a wand that has the third lowest tier of added lightning damage to spells, which is a mod that you can't normally get from enemies until you kill enemies that can drop level 26 loot, but you're getting it at level 20, which is huge. This adds just so much damage that it's fantastic, and actually that wand will carry you all the way through to Act 8 or so. At level 28, you want to supplement with a Lightning Spire Trap, which is a Gravicious reward. Lightning Spire Trap is fantastic, and we'll talk about how you're going to link that now. From Act 6, which is where you get access to all of your skill gems, through to your first time that you get a 5-link or a Tabula Rasa, you're going to want to be using two skills. Your first one is Lightning Trap, linked to added lightning, lift to Swift Assembly, linked to Trap and Mind Damage support. Your second skill is Lightning Spire Trap, linked to Advanced Trap support, linked to Trap and Mind support, linked to Elemental Focus support. As an optional point, you can substitute added Cold for added Lightning, as we were saying. This will do a little bit less damage because some of your effects on your character that only scale your lightning damage will stop scaling that. That added Cold damage will not be scaled there, but you will get more freezes in place. This is safer, and it's what I did. So that would be attached to Lightning Trap. So you'd have your Lightning Trap would be linked to added Cold if you go this way, and your Lightning Spire Trap would either you're using added Lightning if you want to use a different support to what I'm using, or you wouldn't use anything there at all. For your bandits in Act 2, you're going to need to make a choice as to which bandit you help. My advice is to help Alira. Now, this is based upon the fact that it will be a long time until your character is rich in a new league. When your character is rich, it is always the best choice to kill all the bandits. That's because you'll have access to really powerful jewels that you can then slot in, and they will just give you more than any of the bandits will give you. 2 points will often get you a whole extra jewel slot, and if it doesn't, it'll get you sort of close to one. However, it's a very different matter when you don't have access to even to 5 Exalt Jewels, much less 25 Exalt Jewels. At that point, Alira's 5 mana per second and critical strike multiplier is too good to pass up, and the resistances that she gives you also free up space on your gear that you can then dedicate to more damage as well. At high level, so 92 plus, you want to respec to helping Eramir, i.e. killing all the bandits, and the way you do that is by vendoring 20 Regret Orbs and an Onyx Amulet, and you will get a Book of Reform. Gem slots. This is going to cover the basics, but there is some flexibility here. We don't need all slots for the core plan of the build. So you can then put in other things that you think work for your playstyle in your other slots. This is just the basics here. Chest and gloves. These are dedicated to your main traps. We'll return to those later. 3-link. And this is my weapon in my case. Arcanist brand linked to Assassin's Mark linked to Wave of Conviction. So this brand will automatically cast Assassin's Mark and Wave of Conviction for you, and will target the enemy that the brand is actually on. And this is a really useful setup because it will ensure that you are able to sustain these debuffs against bosses much more effectively than trying to mess around with casting each of them individually. The Wave of Conviction, as long as it does more lightning damage than it does anything else, which will usually be the case, will end up debuffing the monster's lightning resistance, which is great for you. And Assassin's Mark will make them less resilient against critical strikes and more likely to be critically hit. All of this is good stuff. You definitely want to have this set up. You're not going to need to cast this on every rare monster. It's there for the toughest stuff. If you can't kill a monster within 6 or 7 seconds, that's the sort of monster that you want to use this Arcanist brand setup on. We're going to have a 2-link. You can put this anywhere. Cast when damage taken, gem level 1, linked to Molten Shell. Now, I suggest gem level 4 or 8 on Molten Shell. Molten Shell can be supported up to gem level 10 by cast when damage taken, but cast when damage taken has a pretty high mana cost multiplier, And for this reason, I find that having gem level 4, which costs 20 mana every time it goes off, or gem level 8, which costs 22, is just better value than going to gem level 10, which would cost you 25. If you go beyond gem level 10, then you need a higher level cast when damage taken for the gem to trigger at all. And then at that case, it may not go off quickly enough to save you in a dangerous situation. A Molten Shell doesn't gain all that much with gem levels, but it does get a higher mana cost. So for that reason, pick gem level 4 or 8 on Molten Shell. I'll personally be using gem level 4. For your shield or your second weapon, this is where you put your defensive reservations, Defiance Banner, Grace, and Determination. For some time you won't be able to use all these reservations, that's fine, level them all anyway. For your move skill, Flame Dash, Link to Faster Casting, Link to Arcane Surge. For your utility options, you can't use all of these, and so you shouldn't try to, but you're going to want to potentially consider a self-cast Molten Shell. Now this will share a cooldown with the cast when damage taken setup. The reason that you might consider a self-cast one as well is that the self-cast one will give you more agency over when it goes off. Let's say that you see an enemy doing a big wind-up attack. If you've got a cast when damage taken set up for your Molten Shell, you might be thinking, I'm not sure I can survive that. If you self-cast Molten Shell first, you can go, all right, I'm just going to stand my ground and I'm just going to press my Molten Shell button, which for me is Q, and that's going to put a ablative buffer of hit points on me, and then I'll just endure this attack and survive and then counterattack. That's going to mean that my cast when damage taken is not going to go off for a couple of seconds, but I'm aware of that. If you find that that's too fiddly, then of course you don't need to use this. You can use some other utility thing instead. Self-cast Molten Shell does work really well with increased duration, especially because you don't have the big mana multiplier of cast when damage taken coming into effect here. You can also consider using a Golem. You can consider using the Clarity Aura, which I was using as just a low-level aura when I was playing through, and you can also consider using a Decoy Totem. I really like Decoy Totem. I think it's one of the most underrated skill gems in the game. It is purely a utility skill. It doesn't kill things, but it is really effective at just distracting monsters for you in dangerous situations. Another option, you've got Void Sphere. Again, it's just pure utility. It just controls enemies, puts them in a spot where you want them, and then you can kill them at your leisure. Lastly, you want Skitterbots linked to Unbound Ailments. Now, you will not be able to afford to turn this on for a long period of time. This is your least important reservation, but it's just there being leveled up. And then once you start getting your passive tree fully fledged out, then you'll be able to turn on those Skitterbots and they will do some great work for you. Your primary links. So you're going to have Vaal Lightning Trap is best when linked with Charge Traps, Swift Assembly, Trap and Mind Damage support, Added Lightning support or Awakened Added Lightning support if you can afford it, and Inspiration. So choose up to 6 gems there, but you might have to choose less than that if you are using this in a 4 link, as I will be. Lightning Spire Trap links to Lightning Penetration, Trap and Mind Damage, Inspiration, Added Lightning support / Awakened Added Lightning support if you can get it, Elemental Focus and or Advanced Traps. Again, choose up to 6 of them. Advanced Traps is the most important of those, and it has fantastic alternate qualities. If you can get your hands on the alternate quality Advanced Traps, they are amazing. This build can only use one of these as a 5+ link until Shaper items start being acquired. The other one has to be a 4 link. Now I suggest that you use Lightning Spire as your 6 link early, and that's what I'm going to be doing. But you can certainly go the opposite way if you prefer. 4 link Lightning Traps will kill all the trash monsters that you encounter, maybe not on the first hit, but they will hit often, so it should be fine for getting monsters down quickly. And it will also shock all non-trash monsters, and then Lightning Spire Trap comes along and it cleans up the tough stuff. Empower is a good support too, but only when it's gem level 4. Empower 3 is meh tier. If you can get an Empower 4, fantastic, use it, but Empower 4 is a very, very valuable item, and so it's something that I'm not going to suggest people use initially. When you can get one, then just replace something else with it. Endgame mana reservations. At endgame, we're going to be reserving 50% of our mana for Determination, 50% for Grace, 35% for Skitterbots, except that's multiplied by 1.2 for Unbound Ailments, so a total of 42%, 10% for Defiance Banner. So that adds up to 152%. In terms of reservation efficiency, we are going to have 57% that is universal and 82% for Grace with this tree, with the Amulet Anointment that we're going to be using. 12% of this is going to be on a Cluster Jewel. If you can't afford that at all, then it's the Skitterbots that are the weakest link and the Skitterbots that have to be turned off for the moment. Optionally, you can also use a low-level Clarity as well. And that's particularly good at endgame if you get a Watcher's Eye that supports it. So for gearing through the axe, we've already talked about the vendor recipe. There is a rare topaz ring, a 3-link wand, and an alteration, or you can use a sapphire ring instead of a topaz ring if you'd like to get cold damage instead. Will not scale as well, but will be strong defensively. From monster level 51 onwards, you want to start identifying rare wands. Now, some of these will be better than the one that you have been using since level 20, and level 51 flat dispels plus bench crafted spell damage percent is going to be great. Pick up items that already have the right links for you and that are not magic. Apply an ID scroll if it's rare, and maybe it's going to be an upgrade. Otherwise, use an essence on it. You'll probably have a bunch of rubbish essences that you don't care about. Throw them on your items, and eventually you'll find upgrades. If you're playing in hardcore, use a wand and a shield. If you're in softcore, it's perfectly reasonable to use 2 wands. You want to remember that you've got your bench crafts and your ring implicits as the best spots to get your resistances. So you're probably going to want to use mostly 2 stone rings while you're leveling, because they give you the most resistances, and then you can add on to that bench crafts to turbocharge those resistances, get your resist to 75 as quickly as you can, and keep them there after Kitava in Act 5. For gearing in early maps, Tier 1 flat spell damage comes online at item level 74, and Tier 2 at item level 62. Combine this with benchcraft spell damage percent, and you've got something fantastic. The other thing that really flies under the radar usually are incursion wands that have the Topatantes prefix on them. This is a hybrid of spell damage percent and a bunch of flat added lightning or cold or fire. And any of these are fine because they're quite a good tier of spell damage percent, but they also don't count, they don't block out the bench crafts that would add even more flat spell damage on top of that. So you can get that, you can get those if you use the Atlas Node's Artifacts of the Vaal, or you can source them in trade, and they can be really good items to get yourself going. Your goal is going to be to get life and resist everywhere, spell suppression as you can get it. Spell suppression is fantastic when you get 100% of it. It's not as good until that point, and we're not really speccing into it on the default tree. Although, of course, if you've got 80% on your gear, definitely pick up the remaining 20% on the tree. Just unspec whatever you have to. Unspec some damage, you know, some critical strike multiplier or something like that. Go and pick up the rest of that spell suppression at that point, but only do that until you can get 100% on gear. Atziri's boots are also fantastic. Life, movement speed, and spell suppression. They aren't common though, and Atziri takes a bit of practice to learn. So for an endgame option, I want to quickly refer to the Alternating Scepters. This is a heist exclusive base, and it has Secrets of Suffering on it. This removes your character's ability to chill, freeze, ignite, and shock entirely, but it does not remove the ability to chill and shock from your Skitterbots. It then grants your critical strikes the ability to inflict brittle based upon the amount of cold damage that you do, also scorch based upon the amount of fire damage you do, also inflict sap based upon the amount of lightning damage you do. All you care about here is brittle because brittle is really powerful. Brittle causes enemies to be more susceptible to taking critical strikes and much more susceptible. It's a lot more effective than something like a Diamond Flask is. So brittle is amazing, and it'll cap critical strike chance for you on its own, and this scepter is not hard to craft if you can get the base. But you are giving up the ability to inflict shocks yourself. It's something to seriously consider once your mana reservations are all sorted out and you've got your Skitterbots going with Unbound Ailments attached to them. Here's the planned passive tree. A couple of key points. We're taking 3 aura clusters on this. We're taking the weakest one here, Leadership. We're taking one up here and one down here. These are because aura clusters are fantastic. With Grace, Determination, and Defiance banner, these give us more defense than pretty much anything else that we could spec into on the passive tree. Additionally, we have Ghost Shroud, which alongside about 500 energy shield on gear will provide us a considerable amount of life replenish while the Ghost Shrouds remain. Ghost Shrouds are really good if you are taking a bunch of hits that you weren't expecting. They're not so good if you take one overwhelmingly massive hit, but that doesn't happen that much in Path of Exile. Most times that you die, it's because in the space of like a quarter of a second, you take 6 or 7 hits for 1,000 damage each, and Ghost Shroud is phenomenal in situations like that. The weakest parts of this tree, the path to Throatseeker up here, which is a lot of points for the critical strike multiplier that you get from it, and also the path to Leadership and these life nodes here. These are your weakest links. These are the things you should take last, and they're also the things that you can unspec if you need to pick up something else on the tree. You path quite near some spell suppression nodes. I think they're around here. If your gear is close to 100% but not quite there, unspec some critical strike multiplier and spec the suppression. The listed cluster jewels that I've got here are very easily acquired. Introspection will take you an average of 66 alteration orbs to roll on item level 68 clusters. This assumes that you always apply an augmentation as well when you get just a suffix. And the set and forget plus guerrilla tactics cluster jewel here is also really easy to roll. Like, they're both really common rolls. You're also very close to a number of jewel slots on this tree. Obviously, you should take these as soon as you've got mediocre jewels. So there's one here, there's one here, that's 2 points. This one's only 1 point, this one's 2 points, this one's 2 points. Once you've got even mediocre jewels, they're worth taking. For ailments, let's talk about ailment solutions. You've got Shock and Ignite, solved by Pyromaniac. Corrupted Blood, we're going to deal with this through a flask early in progression, ideally an instant life flask. We're going to then rely upon a jewel much later. Like, once you get to late red maps, you want to not be susceptible to Corrupted Blood at all, because it will kill you sometimes really quickly. Like, it's the sort of thing that can take you from full life to dead in 150 milliseconds. So for that reason, you are going to want to get a jewel that has Corrupted Blood immunity on it. The rest of the mods on that jewel can be something you improve over time. For Traditional Bleed, you are going to use a flask early, and it will be the same flask that you use for Corrupted Blood. For Freeze and Chill, this is going to need to be a flask. This can be reactive or proactive, and the current path of building that I've got here is going to have both of them. Use one of these two. You don't need to use both of them. Ultimately, you would then want to replace some of the flasks later with more powerful endgame options. Things like the really powerful flasks, Cinder Swallow Urn and or Bottled Faith. But there's something that you can replace when you get them. Now, I'm not a fan of Purity of Elements on this build. If I did have the reservation mana free for it, I would probably run Zealotry or Wrath instead. I think more damage is probably better. We can solve ailments. We're a Saboteur. We get a lot of the solving of ailments done for free, so the rest of it is going to be reasonably easily done. Okay, let's talk about gearing up in maps. Firstly, we're going to talk weapon. You're going to start with bad leveling gear, tier 3 flat dispels, benchcraft % damage. Now, your next sort of tier of upgrades after that is 2 of tier 1 flat dispels, tier 3 plus spell % or lightning %, +1 to lightning spells, or +1 to all spells, or an incursion modded weapon, Topotanti, that's improved by a benchcraft. Your next sort of tier after that is either 3 of the above mods with benched trap throw speed, Cerberus Slim if you want to be very defensive, or a very good Topotanti weapon. There'll be other options as well. These are the ones that jump to mind, and I will put out an update video when I get to sort of late maps and start really trying to min-max this character. For gearing up in maps boots, we have a couple of options that we can go with. So we're going to start with bad leveling gear, 25% move speed, some life and resist. We're then going to upgrade this to 30% move speed, spell suppression and life, which could just be Atziri's Step or could be a rare item that is very similar to Atziri's Step. Then from there, you're going to want to upgrade to either an enchanted and well-corrupted Atziri's Step, or elevated Hunter Pierce Boots, or a Voidwalker, or a Replica Voidwalker. So this is Voidwalker, this is Replica Voidwalker, just as a recap of what these items do. Voidwalker is the better choice. It will solve all of your piercing problems. You have phasing if you've killed recently, and projectiles pierce 5 additional targets while you have phasing. Or alternately, you can go with Replica Voidwalker, which does the same thing except it's +1 chain instead of +5 pierces. These are about equal in power level. The difference is that Replica Voidwalker has a big drawback as well, 10% increased damage taken while phasing. That's kind of painful. Okay, so gearing up in maps, talking about chess. Now I'm leaving this somewhat limited because there are new unknown options. This is because of the Eldritch crafting. This is going to be a factor for all of the other item slots as well. There'll be new options that will be found that will replace some of these. So you're going to start with bad leveling 4-link or 5-link, life resist and ideally some spell suppression. Then you're going to want to upgrade to either a Tabula Rasa or to a Divination card source 6-link that you just throw some basic essences on. So the Divination cards that I'm thinking of here, if you're in Trade League, you could trade for the Sacrifice. If you're in Solo Self-Found, you could possibly self-farm Dapper Prodigy, and there's a few other ones as well. The Ethereal is more Trade League only. There's Chains That Bind. There's quite a few of them. All these Divination cards will help you get yourself a 6-link early on. There's also probably going to be some sort of league mechanic with Arch Nemesis that we don't know about yet that will also drop 6 links, because 6 links have been getting quite a lot easier to get in recent leagues. From these, you could upgrade to a Skin of the Loyal, a Skin of the Lords, a Shadow Stitch, or an Influence 6-link. There'll be other options as well. We'll come back to this once we know a little bit more about exactly how the Eldritch crafting works, because I'm sure that there'll be a lot of things there that people use. Figuring up in maps on a shield. Again, you're going to start with life resist, and if you can get it, spell suppression. Try and upgrade to either high evasion, spell suppression, and resist with life or welcome bonus. You'll notice that I'm mentioning evasion here specifically and not armor, not energy shield. And that's because items that have a high dexterity requirement have a bias towards rolling spell suppression, and items that have a dexterity requirement of 0 cannot roll spell suppression. Then you have a damage shield, or such as a pure intelligence spell damage roll shield. After that, you could look to upgrade to a rare shield that also has Shaper Tier 1 reservation efficiency on it, which will then free up some extra options for your auras, or that also has Shaper life gain on block on it. Or you could upgrade to Atziri's Reflection. Now this will also change your belt to Coward's Legacy, which will be a powerful damage option, and that's why it is seen as the ultimate upgrade along the lines of the pure damage shield. So for gearing up in maps, gloves. Now you also want to consider incursion gloves here. There are some great options, but I think the best way is going to be to start with your standard spell suppression life resist gear, which you might use for a while. Then go for Shaper Pseudo-Link gloves. So Shaper Pseudo-Link gloves will have a line like Socketed Gems are supported by level 16 advanced traps. Now that's absolutely fantastic because it means that you can have your Lightning Spire trap in here, get all the benefits of the advanced trap support, but also have it as a 5-link while used alongside a 6-linked lightning trap. This is ultimately, I think, a really good way to set up your character to have a 5-link and a 6-link at the same time, because they do different things. Lightning Spire Trap will help you burn down bosses, a Lightning Trap will clear the map for you. This is a real set of gloves that exists in Standard at the moment, and the reason that I pointed them out is that they've also got spell suppression on them. The rest of the mods are pretty bad, but it's got the Socketed Gems supported by advanced traps and spell suppression on them. And this is sort of the upgrade from the Shaper Pseudo 5-link gloves if you wanted to go more defensively. If you wanted to go more offensively, you get a Shaper 5-link a Pseudo 5-link that has a good Essence mod on it. Alternately, in unique items, there's Valkyries, which I actually found when I was playing the build. I was playing it in solo self-found. Valkyries is really good because it will give +2 to the level of all socketed Val skills, and you're going to be using a Val version of Lightning Trap. It's just better than the normal Lightning Trap, gives you more options. And then you could potentially use that for a while. It gives a good chunk of life, a good chunk of cold resistance, as well as the +2 levels to your Val Lightning Trap. Or you could possibly upgrade to a Slave Driver's Hand, which is a really good unique item that comes out of incursion content. Not really something that you can farm easily in solo self-found at all. It's actually pretty brutal to get in SSF, but it is something that is usually available in trade leagues, albeit for a price. It'll be a couple of exalts at least. Figuring up in maps on your helmet, again, potential for Eldritch crafting to smash up these plans, but you start with leveling gear, spell suppression, life resist, etc. that you might use for a while. Then look for an enchanted helmet. Lightning Trap pierces 3 additional targets, and then craft onto that suppression, life, and resistances. Alternately, you could use a Crusader, -9% lightning resistance to nearby enemies' helmet. Then you could look to upgrade this to a helmet that has both the enchant and the Crusader mod, or has the enchant and has excellent other mods, or to an item that is an elevated Crusader, -12% lightning resist to nearby monsters. Gearing up in maps, the amulet slot. Guess what? Everything about amulets has been completely overhauled, and this is going to take a while to work out, hence the really trippy background here. Your best stats are +1 to all spell gems, +1 intelligence gems, +1 to lightning gems, life, and any other high tier resist rolls you can get. But there's lots of other good rolls. And something that's now an option, that's not been an option in the past, +1 to spell gems is a newly added mod. That's in the core mod pool. +1 to intelligence gems, that used to be in one of the influence pools, the hunter pool. +1 to lightning gems used to be in the crusader pool. It used to be that you were forced into using influence items to get those specific mods. These are now being moved into the normal mod pool for amulets. So this means that Jorgen's tier 2 talisman bench may actually be excellent on this build. +1 gem rolls are no longer influence exclusive, and this means that you might be able to take an amulet that you've crafted yourself, that you get it to a point where it's fairly good, then you take the RNG risk and turn it into a tier 2 talisman. Don't use 3, 2 will work better with this build. I do think there's a bit of potential there, but that is a fairly advanced option. And your amulet, you definitely want to anoint Sovereignty. It's one of the best aura nodes, and it's in an area of the tree that we go nowhere near, so it's fantastic to get it here. For your ring and belt slot, leveling gear, you want to use spell suppression, life, and or resist, and you might use these for a while. Hey, that seems pretty familiar, those mods, that text. Then you want to upgrade to Opal Rings and Stygian Vices with same sort of stats but better, or you could use a Mark of the Shaper unique ring. Mark of the Shaper is hard to get yourself, it drops from Uber Elder, it's a very common drop though, and people that are farming Uber Elder will have lots of them. Then you could upgrade to a Crystal Belt with Energy Shield and Evasion and more, or you could upgrade to a Mage Blood or a Headhunter, those are expensive, or you could upgrade to a Coward's Legacy, which will require using the Adsri Shield. For jewels, your classic jewels are at their best when they're giving you life percent and critical strike multiplier. Deft fossils roll good jewels, whether used with or without pristine fossils as well. Medium cluster jewels, you want Set and Forget and Guerrilla Tactics on a 4 or 5 passive. For small cluster jewels, you want Introspection, which is only available on reservation ones. Introspection is ridiculously good as aura effect triple dips on armor and evasion scaling, which then empowers our Ghost Shrouds, our Molten Shell. It's a really strong defensive boost to have even one copy of Introspection, and if there's any way that you can modify the build to fit in more, that's even better. In Trade League only, you could potentially look for a Megalomaniac that has any 2 of Introspection, Snowstorm, Guerrilla Tactics, or Set and Forget, and conceivably use that. Obviously, you'll have to weigh up whether it's better than the alternatives that you'd have from traditional cluster jewels, and I think that sometimes it will be. I've made an initial path of building. Now, this is not something to exactly follow. I'm a great believer in the idea that builds are not a precise recipe you have to follow exactly. They're a starting point for you to then deviate from. This is my character from a 3.16 test run with a couple of minor changes made because we realized on stream that I'd made a couple of mistakes with the way that I'd set things up in the build. So I thought, all right, we're just going to change a few things to things that would make more sense. Now, Eternal Labyrinth was trivial with this pretty bad gear that I'm using. 8 mod red maps were doable, but not trivial. And that is on really, really bad gear, as you will see when you look at this. I'm going to post updates after 12 or 15 hours of play, and there will be changes to this build. This is not a final product. This is going to evolve as we play with it in the actual league. But there is a Pastebin link there so that you can download the actual POB itself. Anyways, that's all I've got. May your Varlobs have interesting results, and I will see you in game.